All right, Marcus, I think it is time to get this show on the road. Welcome, everyone, to another Stoneridge Confab from the office. I'm actually in the office, Marcus. How's everyone doing in chat?
You have a nice view there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, actually, in Dave's office. So he was so kind to offer me his office. Thank you, Dave. Everything plugged in perfectly. I didn't have to rearrange too many of your cords, you know, just about 20 of them. So don't worry, though. We'll take care of it so it all works by the time we're done with Confab here. So how you doing, Marcus? Good to see you. I haven't seen you too much this week.
Yeah, good to see you. No, I was thinking I should have come down to the office if you were going to be there. So
yeah,
next time. We'll do it in person next time.
Do it in person next time. I think that's a great idea. Hey, chat, how are you doing? I saw some people saying hi earlier. Charlie and Rob, thanks for joining. Looking forward to going through the content today from a manufacturing perspective, so it should be quite a bit of fun. Hopefully everything is okay for audio, guys. In chat, feel free to give us some feedback as to the quality. I know I'm a little bit darker on stream right now. I'm actually going through a little old Asus laptop, and it's sucking in Marcus's feed and then rebroadcasting it so that everyone can see. So it's a lot of fun, I'll say that, to go through and make sure everything is working, right? We've got it more down to a science than in the past. We tested for echoing and all that cool stuff, so hopefully it's okay. But beyond that then, Marcus, I'm excited for today. We're going into manufacturing concepts, right?
Yeah. We just thought we would do manufacturing today. Look some at Business Central. I'm going to talk a little bit about some extensions. And I don't know that we've done a lot just sort of explaining extensions and the implications of an extension with Business Central. So we're going to look at some of that too today. And then you're going to show us some supply chain stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a really important thing because one of the questions we typically get for manufacturers, right, is like there's two different business solutions that are out there from Microsoft that tackle really those work streams. So we've got Dynamics 365 Business Central, which you're going to hear us use all the time, small, medium business, right, or small, medium company, SMC, SMB. Really, it's a mid-market solution, right, Marcus, as opposed to an enterprise solution. So And then we've got
I
also,
was
go ahead. Yep.
and I was thinking about so I was thinking about that, and if you look at an analogy like an automobile, right?
Yep.
I know that there's a model of Mercedes that the seat will adjust for me as I'm going around a corner,
So
right?
we're using Mercedes though for this example. I see.
Well, no, I'm just saying
Okay,
that's
here we
very
go.
different than the Honda Civic that I might have, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's features that are going to come with that Mercedes, and there's a price point with that, and there's features that come with your Honda Civic, and there's a price point for that, and target market for both of these products. And I think it's important to look at the bigger picture here. What are you trying to do? What realistically, what does your budget look like? Do you have a team that can support a particular product or not? There's a lot of questions here, and I think if I want the twisting seat, don't look at a Honda Civic.
Or how do you modify the engine to get more horsepower out of that Civic, right? Like that's what the extensions are, right?
Do too.
Right?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
We can add some padding to that Civic to make it sound like a Mercedes. Come on, we can put some time in there to do that. But yeah, I think it's a really valid point, right? So understanding that products, just like cars, even from a software and an architectural perspective, they're designed for a certain type of company, right? They're designed for even a certain vertical, as we would call it. And what we mean by vertical is, like, let's say you're a process manufacturer, or if you are a batch manufacturer, or if you're a discrete manufacturer, right? All of those have that ability. And George, we will add Bluetooth capabilities for you inside of that Civic. So we will absolutely do that. So, but that's the thing that's cool about this, is that we get to go through both of these products to help you kind of right size what you should be looking at. And it's not, and that's what I want to be cautious with too. It's not just the size and the capabilities. It's also the implementation process too, right? Because, for example, we're going to show that today as well from a BC side. Out of the box, BC is fantastic at discrete manufacturing, but through extensions, like you're going to talk through, you can add more capabilities. We can do batch manufacturing, and we can be at a price point that doesn't require you then to jump up into the enterprise solution, because that may not work for your budget, right? As part of that.
That's right.
So, but we can also highlight then today, compare and contrast, like, where are the differences? Like, if we look at it stock between the two solutions, let's start there. And then where would I naturally look at then using supply chain management? Because too many partners are out there, candidly, that just try to sell the product. They don't sell the process and the solution. They're finance and operations people. It's always finance and operations that they're going to sell, right? So this is the beauty of Stoneridge, is that we get to actually play in all products and see where the good fit is for it, right? So this should be I think it'll be fun.
And we spend the time to do that. So, full disclosure, the last 2 weeks, you and I both did separate demos for the same prospect.
Yep.
And so it's the time investment to show the products in their best light and really allow the prospect to see the differences between the two of them.
I was on.
So your comment is legitimate there.
Yeah. Oh, I was on an existing customer conversation that they're big enough for F&O easily, but they're like, well, I don't see the benefit for what we do. We do something so basic in a discrete process for manufacturing that they're like, well, I don't need these additional features, right? And I don't need X, Y, or Z with it. So yeah, that's how we roll here. So I guess kind of with that, Marcus, good introduction. Chat, as we're going through this, please let us know if you have any questions as you go through it, just to let us know like what we can incorporate. We love to answer questions as well from a manufacturing perspective, obviously, during this session. But if you're a manufacturer, I mean, obviously we don't want this to be one way, we want it to be two ways. So feel free to go ahead and ask us questions as we go through this. Marcus, I'm going to actually flip it over into the speaking mode. So going two speakers clipped, and it doesn't fit perfectly yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my content view, and we're going to go into full screen. And look at that. I see a product called, is this Business Central? Is that what this is?
It is. It is. I wish people realize that, we don't rehearse all this stuff.
Yeah, so. I know, right? This is all on the spot.
All right. So focusing around manufacturing, just wanted to talk a little bit about, well, I'm in the right environment here, a little bit about manufacturing. So Business Central, as Scott said, really discrete manufacturing. And, if you're going to define discrete, I like to say I buy a widget, I make a widget, I sell a widget, right? So it's fairly defined in terms of my inputs, in terms of my outputs. And there's really a defined start and end to that cycle. And I'm trying to be a little couching here with my terms, because there are things that we can do that people might say is batch manufacturing. We actually can do it in a discrete format inside of Business Central. So
yeah, and I do want to interrupt real quick with that, Marcus. That's a really valid point, because I'm overgeneralizing when I say, for example, you can't do batch manufacturing without an add-on. I've done implementations where, for example, it wasn't bubbly, but it was like this, where they would actually produce in batch and then they would can, and they would have just 2 steps as part of that output process, right? They didn't have co-products or byproducts as they went through it, and it worked fantastic for that scenario, right? It was more of a batch type environment. So, yep, very good point.
And I think, you said a couple key things. What you have there really is a definable start and end. Yes, you may have had some variable inputs, but even that is probably pretty static, right?
Yep.
Not making adjustments based on some sort of quality reading or something like that you're doing, right? You know the recipe, it's going in, and then you've got a defined output, and you stop the process. Injection molding, where I fill the hopper up with plastic pellets, and I run that for the next 20 days. Now we're probably have a problem where that's not a great fit, right? Because it's not a defined start and end. It's a continual flow process, and that's where Business Central that's probably not a great fit.
Yeah.
But being discrete, I just want to say that net's actually fairly large. So talking through actually how does that manufacturing process work is key. Let's just talk a little bit about the process itself. So with Business Central out of the box, we do actually have several planning or replenishment systems is what we call them here. A purchase, obviously something I'm going to buy. And assembly is actually a nice intermediary step. So again, we're working with small and medium-sized businesses. I have worked with some manufacturers where they do have a multi-level bill of material, but the whole idea of a routing and scheduling is really not necessary or just not needed at all.
Yep.
So the idea of being able to use an assembly in Business Central is really a powerful tool because it's an intermediary step. It's not going to make or require then the heavy lifting of a full manufacturing system, but it does allow you the multi-level bill of materials. Now, there's some limitations with assemblies. Not going to get into that. The biggest one, obviously, is not a routing. Production, then, is a multi-level bill of material with a routing.
Yep.
So we can set up phantom bombs in there. We obviously can create sub-assemblies ahead of time. We can do make to order. We can do make to stock. We've got all of that capability in the system. We do have machine centers and work centers. So if you've got, you got 4 or 5 punch presses, for example, you can put those in as machine centers. You essentially could put different capacities or efficiencies on those. Could have different costs on them. I don't know that you'd want to do that, but then you could roll those up into a work center, for example. So there is some flexibility in terms of what the client requirements would be, or even their configuration on a shop floor. So a lot of options, again, is really what I'm saying in terms of configuration of how those things work. We do have, then we have planning. So Scott and I just spent some time with planning yesterday, which is kind of fun.
Yes.
There are 5 planning methods. Not planning is one of them. So we certainly do have, and there's reasons for doing each of these. If you've got, larger volume sales, for example, or use or consumption of a product, but it's a low dollar value, there's different really processes or algorithms to use to determine when do I reorder this thing and how much am I going to get, right? So that's really kind of these questions that are being answered here. But again, some sophisticated features here. This isn't just a reorder point or min-max, for example. So some of your SMB, small, medium-sized business products that do manufacturing, that's your planning option. Yep, you've got min-max, and that's sort of what you have. These are fairly sophisticated options then that you can use for planning. Some nuances here when you layer in, let's say, a location. So that was the issue Scott and I worked through. Adding locations into items allows you really to do different planning methods at each location. So even if you think about a small, medium-sized business that has maybe several manufacturing facilities, you've got flexibility to plan and schedule at each of those locations. So it's not just sort of a one location setup either. Doing multiple locations is certainly supported. The other thing is the system, which I really like, allows you to then set up for a given location a different replenishment system. So if you think about an organization that maybe has multiple distribution centers but one manufacturing facility.
And we lost Marcus, it looks like. We've had some connectivity. We'll just give it a second here, and as in the words of the famous Adam Hallbeck, I will do some vamping as we go through this. So as Marcus was kind of showing here, the reason obviously for those different types of really replenishment systems, and then also for the actual reordering policies, if you think about it, like some sites, for example, from a reordering policy perspective, they need to have that type of connectivity, right? So what that means then is that they need to be able to store inventory at, for example, a different quantity in a given location. So that's an interesting aspect of it, is that we can actually go through in Business Central, like you were saying, Marcus, right? Actually maintain, for example. Yep, you're back. We can actually maintain. I was vamping for you as we went through it. So
I actually never lost you. I could hear you the whole time.
Oh, so you could. Okay. Yep, that's good. We'll play it like that the next time it happens too. We're practicing this as we're on stream here with everyone. So, all right, let's keep going. And Rob was asking, the beer making process is or is not discrete. Well, I guess it depends on how you're making the beer, right? If you're just putting it into a keg and that kind of stuff, or from keg to can, you could probably make that a discrete process, right? Just more discrete with it. So, Anyways, go ahead, Marcus. Sorry.
Okay. So that in a broad sense gives you some picture. We've got, from a manufacturing, we've got a production order, we've got a routing, we've got a BOM. It can be fairly sophisticated. From there, you'd create a production order. One of the things with Business Central out of the box is we don't have, let's say, shop floor data collection. So that process really is it's a manual process, or it would require some design of pages, for example, to allow that at a work center level, or it would require an extension. I don't know that that's necessarily bad either. I think the idea that shop floor data collection is something worthwhile for every organization, I don't think that's true. I think an organization needs to evaluate the cost benefit of doing shop floor data collection.
I 100% agree with that. There are so many customers that we talk to and prospects that are like, well, we're told that's what we should do. It's like, well, you could do it on a piece of paper. Really, it depends on when you need that immediate feedback. And even then, in Business Central, you can just go to the production order and update it if you really want to show that, right? The actual production line details that you can actually go through the journal and then have all that detail in there to register what you consumed and what the time was for it, and you can reflect then some accuracy there, right?
Yeah, and we've got a production journal here, but you've got a consumption journal, you've got an output journal, again, configuration options here depending on what kind of flushing methods you're using, that sort of stuff. But there are ways to do it. I'm not a proponent of shop floor data collection because it's the cool thing. I think you really need to evaluate that. Is it worth it? And for a lot of people, it's not. It just isn't worth it.
And for some, it really is, right? Because I've gotten many customers that, they've got like flow lines. One of the first concepts I was actually introduced to about almost 20 years ago was at a hearing aid manufacturer. And I'm really grateful for the one in the area, in the Minneapolis area here, just learning so much about it. But they did flow lines, and then they had little terminals that were there that they would enter in detail with. So they did have something like that where they had some type of, front end that they could interact with to register the quantity, have it auto flush, forward flush or backward flush based upon the operation they were on. So, and that was all on the nav product before it became became Business Central, and actually at the nav 3.60, like right when manufacturing was integrated into the Navision product way back in the day. So yeah, it's definitely, like you said, some customers absolutely love it and they're set up for it really well. Others, I mean, they're going through an implementation and they don't even have Wi-Fi or Ethernet lines dropped to the work cell areas, and it's like, well, you guys got to figure all that out first, right? Because you need that to do this. So
Yep. Well, yeah, and then you have the whole people issue. You know, I've seen too many times, you know, warehouses or manufacturing facilities sort of have a lot of issues because of that change management, or that really the interpersonal people aspect of not only change, but you're changing a job. Now you're asking people to do things that they're just not interested in doing. But that's a different conversation.
Exactly.
Anyway, so there's ways to accomplish it if needed. So we certainly can do it if you need to. I just think that's a discussion that has to happen. So,
Agreed.
you know, we've got that tool. We do have a planning. So we have planning tools. So we have a planning worksheet that can go out and look at both material requirements as well as manufacturing scheduling. So it's going to look at capacity and demand and raw materials, and it can do all of the planning stuff for you too. So I think there's fairly robust features here, again, in that SMB space that are really great. I do want to just transition a little bit here to talk about extensions. So,
and then before you do that, Marcus, everything that you've shown so far, this is out of the box. So you can do items, multi-level items, phantoms, production, flushing, consumption, output, like all the all production related activities can handle really natively out of the box inside of Business Central. That's a correct statement? Just okay.
That's right. Yep. And the planning.
Yep. Okay. So then even using like capacity planning, right? That type of stuff, like work cell load, how much time it's going to do to produce it, which also means then you can do like capable to promise, right? Where it'll plan a production order for you to figure out how long it's going to take to produce that particular product. Like you can get down to that level in BC. Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah. The planning features are hooked up off of the sales order.
Yep.
And so, yeah, those capabilities are certainly in the system. Just really slowing down. I hope I don't lose you again here. But under the planning, we've got order promising that'll both do available to promise and capable to promise. So more of a distribution concept there versus capable to promise, which would be your manufacturing side of things. So, yeah, there are a lot of features here, So extensions. So let's talk a little bit about that. And what I like to say is that when the original product behind Business Central, which was Navision, when this product was developed, it was the intention to allow the system to be modified, right? So in terms of the design and the development of the application, they started by creating a development platform, and then they developed the product, which eventually became Business Central on top of that. So I like to say that the idea of making changes or enhancements to the system was not a secondary thought. It wasn't an afterthought, right? I think some ERP systems, they set out to build every single feature functionality anybody would ever want. And then somewhere along the line, they said, oh, but if people need to make changes to it, then we have to figure out how that was going to work. Nav Business Central wasn't that way. They set out from the beginning to allow modifications to the system, and that's sort of evolved now that we're in a SaaS environment and we're web-based and all that sort of stuff. And so what we have today is called an extension. So an extension is code that sits outside of your source code. So that's a little shift if you're familiar with Nav, but it allows you to make enhancements to the application. So I like to say you can add columns to existing tables. You can add new tables, new pages, new functionality in the application. I'm just going to go to the list of extensions that I have. Actually, I'm going to switch environment. I'm going to just...
Of course, we're getting a little bit of slowdown again. The internet from working from home, the struggle is real in these scenarios. So what Marcus is going to be showing is the extension that adds, for example, some batch capabilities. Now, into obviously into Business Central. So that way, what you can do is you can tackle, you know, a lot of the base concepts in the manufacturing, being able to connect and basically go through and do the transactions that you need from a discrete perspective. But there are a lot of customers that are out there that need to have the ability as well to do some, you know, batch processing, for example. And what we mean by batch is typically where maybe you're going to have multiple products or recipes that you use then to really go through and then drive you know, some type of product that you're going to have with it, right? So looks like we got Marcus. I'm going to try giving him a call real quick here while we're on stream. So, but the point is that you can actually go through and then use that capability to go and do some batch processing using then this type of extension. And Marcus, you can actually go ahead and just do full screen again and we'll be good. And then we'll flip over to me coming up here as well if you want to do your present screen. Can you hear me, Marcus?
Are we back?
Yep,
we're back.
Hear you.
Okay.
You're back. Just go ahead and present.
I thought I did. No? I'll do it again.
We'll try it one more time. See if we can get there we go. Looking awesome. We are back. And so what I did is I framed it for you. We are going to basically what I framed was Pro Batch, for example, being able to do batch processing. Like if you want to do an extension, you can add that then into the Business Central environment, right? To be able to then extend the manufacturing capabilities inside of Business Central. So go take it from there.
Yep. Actually, I didn't lose any of your audio again.
Cool.
So the one thing I like to point out though is that Microsoft is actually using extensions to update the application as well. So this isn't just an add-on concept. Microsoft is leveraging it. But to your point, the Pro Batch components. So these are some exciting features in here, and really what it's doing is it's pushing, I think, the SMB market. It's pushing us up into that tier 1 space with some feature functionality here. So we talked about some advanced features, and these are ways that you can actually get these advanced features into Business Central. So a couple of modules, and I'm just going to talk to them today. The first one is manufacturing. So the idea that we're moving from a discrete system into a batch system, which would then allow us to do things like a recipe. So if you've got a proportional recipe that is being created, and as I create the production order, again, it's going to scale up or down based on this recipe that I have. It's more than just a percentage of a product though, because you could do that with base Business Central, right?
Yep.
But with the recipe now, we have the ability to do filler products. So if we've got a recipe and we need to basically supplement till we get to a certain volume of product in the manufacturing cycle, we can do things like that. The other thing that we get then with manufacturing is really a single place to manage what we call a manufacturing specification. It will then create the appropriate BOMs and routings for the manufacturing process. So recipe, fillers, that sort of thing, but it also streamlines the setup a little bit where you may not have complicated routing processes. We don't need to do that. So it's just some simplification there. What I then like on top of that is this lot management component. So we can do lot serial tracking inside of Business Central, warranty dates, we can do lot tracing, we've got all that capability. With Pro Batch, though, we add a lot of lot capabilities in terms of the disposition of a lot. Do I want to quarantine a lot? Do I want to put QA on a lot because of an expiration date? So we can set up some rules around that. We also can set up rules then in terms of what lots can I consume based on that expiration date. So maybe I'm within 90 days of an expiration date. I set up a rule that says I actually can't use that lot then in consumption as part of a production process. And then we also can do lot tracing capabilities, which again we had before. So some nice lot enhancements that are there. Coupled with that then is this quality assurance. So you'll notice these are sort of building blocks that they're adding functionality into the system. With quality assurance then, we've got the idea of a feature. And so a feature would be, and I'm actually just going to show you one because I think this might be a little better. If I go to features, so this would be something that, and I've got some sample ones in here, something that I want to track or know about for a particular item or at the lot level, for example. So some basic temperature things, but potency. Potency is a great one. We're working with several prospects right now that they're using a calculated value of a particular potency that's calculated at a lot level, for example. So now, as I add specific components of a particular item at the lot level to a batch, the overall potency now of that particular batch is being adjusted. So much more sophisticated in terms of how that production process works than just a discrete measurement or a discrete process. Moisture content, metals, all these sort of things that we can look at that allow us then to attach features to different lots, and then we can add quality, for example. So we can do inspection orders on incoming products. We can set up inspection orders at particular steps in the manufacturing process. We can do it at the point of shipment. All of those inspection orders then could be fairly complicated if you wanted it to be. So we can do samples if we want to. We can do destructive samples if we want to. We can take measurements then that affect the value of those features of my particular lot. So you see we're just building more and more functionality on here. Really cool feature, Scott, that I told George I was going to pose this to you is we actually have the ability with ProBatch to resequence production orders based on these features. So for example,
native in the enterprise space.
That's what I thought too.
It's called production sequencing. Go ahead. Yep.
But we could do that now.
Allergens, right? Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is really cool. So
it is absolutely.
Allergens, or if you've got kosher products, which was a food manufacturer we are working with, they have to sequence or they want to sequence production based on those allergens, or even kosher, because they're going to have to clean equipment. They're going to have to do things in between. So we don't want to clean in between every step. We want to group those, through the day or whatever it is. So we clean once. So features that we can now do in Business Central, which we couldn't do before, which I think is pretty cool. So
I 100% agree. I mean, and especially for the bagel is always the industry that I use as an example with that, where you're going to have nuts that are added to the bagel, for example, that are going to be the toppings, right, so to speak. Yep. So doing the production sequencing for allergens or for kosher product, for example, that also affects like clean out processes, right? There's a capacity requirement, there's downtime with it. So yeah, it's a definite needed feature, especially if you're getting more into the batch space with this, which is good to see that they've added it to here for this extension.
Yep. So very cool feature. Again, I think you're probably pushing the limits of what most SMB products can do, and we can do it now. So I think very exciting stuff. Couple of other extensions that ProBatch has available. One of them is trade. So trade allows us to do more advanced commissions, bonus calculations. For example, we can look at pricing, not just on a given transaction, but over a period of time. Again, some requirements that I think a lot of SMB products, you'd have to customize to do it. Yep. We now have some extensions that allow us to build that functionality in, which is really cool. There's some advanced warehouse management. That's available. ProBatch also has a mobile application that they're going to be releasing in the fourth quarter. So when we're looking at shop floor data collection, we're looking at barcoding in terms of receiving, inventory movements, that sort of stuff. Again, we're going to have another go-to product within the ProBatch family, which is just easier to work with the same developers, for example, of the extension. So that's really cool.
Didn't they add like co-products now as well? Like, isn't that a new feature that's coming here as well?
Yeah, I don't have it loaded in here yet.
Okay.
I think it was just released last week. I haven't had time to get it into my system. But yeah, we have what they call joint products, which is, again, when we talked about BC out of the box, we're really talking about a single output. So that is how the system works. I'm going to go through manufacturing process. I can have multiple inputs, be they manufactured inputs, they could be assembly inputs, they could be raw materials, but I have a single output. joint products is going to allow us to do the concepts of co-products and byproducts, which is again really exciting in the SMB
Yeah, you can
space.
say George is all over it. He's like on the sequencing. He's like paint colors, light to dark. Then he's like, it's out now, joint production. So yeah, it is. It's a really cool feature, and it's been a huge gap on the BC side that's really made
Yes,
people move away from BC entirely, right? Because it doesn't do some of these basic concepts that you need in a batch environment. But
that's right.
Microsoft isn't going to add that capability. Yavion is the name of the company that added it, right? And ProBatch is their extension for it.
Yep,
And we're, ironically, we're a reseller, right? Which is why we're showing as well these capabilities. But the point is that this has been a common requirement for customers, and this
yes,
allows you then to use the BC solution, but at the same time then have some of these features that you need from a batch perspective with it, right? Which
yep,
is a
yep,
pretty cool thing, in my opinion,
yep.
instead of
I'd back
customizing
up.
it.
Yeah, and I'd back up a little bit. So I've worked with several med device companies where, or not even med device necessarily, but they're companies that work with lot numbers,
Yep.
and you need to control the disposition or the availability of the lot. I like to point this out that with ProBatch, you can actually do lot management and quality without manufacturing. So you don't necessarily need to be a manufacturing organization to do the advanced lot tracking or quality assurance. So there's an intermediary step that I think could work with just even straight distribution companies that need to do more sophisticated lot traceability type things in their environment. So yeah,
Cool.
I'm excited about these. Again, it elevates really our offering within that SMB space with manufacturing and distribution. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, Marcus, I appreciate the info. I mean, that helps a lot just to kind of frame up at least, hey, here's where BC is, here's where the capabilities are. Chat, you should be spamming some questions if you have it, and we'll answer them as we go through this next portion as well. I guess, Marcus, maybe a natural handoff here is to say you've got BC. BC does a lot of discrete really well out of the box. You can add an extension, and there's multiple extensions that are out there. ProBatch is the one that we align with because, candidly, like we feel it's one of the better extension solutions that are out there. We're very picky at Stoneridge on selecting extensions because candidly, we need to support it, number one. And then number two, the quality of those extensions matters. And you can talk to
Yes.
anyone on the nav team. We have a couple of customizations or teams and companies that we've worked with in the past that were like, we're not, even though it's popular, we're not interested in that because we look at the code and it's spaghetti code, right, type of a thing. So this one's good quality, really good to implement as well. I mean, we've been very successful with it, and it brings those capabilities over. But
Yep.
now it's like, well, wait a second. Why would I ever go to finance, and supply chain, right?
You
And
never would.
yeah, right. Yeah, Mark. Point made, right? Done. Done. Everyone on stream done. We're all done. We're all done. So, and I mean, there's a very valid question around there, right? So,
Yes.
how do I know what to move forward with this, right? And really, that's what I want to show today as we go through this, just to kind of understand where are the differences or the nuances that I may want to consider with it. And some of those come into play where it's like, well, I just want some basic manufacturing capabilities, but then I'm acquiring multiple companies, or I've got, intercompany transactions or an intercompany perspective that may add some complexity, or my volume is huge, or I've got there's just more and more and more that as you start looking at the enterprise space, we've solved a lot of that, right? Where it's native functionality out of the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and we're going to jump into really the finance and operation apps is what we call it, which is the supply chain management capability. I got some questions too, or some statements I just want to catch up with too. Compliance as well, quality, electronic signatures for FDA on ProBatch as well. And then for food, pharma, and med device, George is mentioning that it's a great solution then for that ProBatch capability, right? As
right.
part of it, right? So
Yep.
the other thing to consider is that you're now, let's say you're above a certain market segment, let's say 250 million on up. $1 billion. And this is a generalization. When we talk about numbers for revenue and user count, that isn't the only decision that we use to say go supply chain management or go to Business Central. There's transaction counts, there's operational maturity, there's change management that we usually talk to and understand as part of your organization's evolution, right?
Yep.
So those are big factors to consider when looking at the other solution that is out there, the supply chain management capability, because it's a bigger product to implement, not just from a manufacturing, but from an advanced distribution perspective as well. So what we can do is just kind of highlight some of the differences. So everything that we saw there, we can do that Marcus showed natively, really out of the box. We have different terms for it, obviously, but I want to highlight then some of the differences between them that go above and beyond then really some of those base capabilities that we saw within Business Central and the Pro Batch capability. So I'm going to go ahead and flip my screen over. Marcus, I'm going to share it for you too so that you can be a participant. I've got to figure all this out though, so we've got that shared. I go here, everyone sees Marcus full screen on stream. Say hi, Marcus.
Hey.
And then we're going to share my screen for you. Share, whoops, that was not it. Share my screen. And we will share that monitor. There you go, Marcus. You should be able to see mine now.
Yep.
So this is supply chain management. This is where we can actually go through and just talk a little bit about some of the capabilities inside of here. So one thing to note just right off the bat, if you have a if you are a discrete manufacturer, if you are a batch manufacturer, if you are a process manufacturer, if you are a lean manufacturer, those are all capabilities that are natively included inside of the supply chain management solution. So we don't have an add-on or an extension that we need to do in order to enable then the more batch or process manufacturing specific capabilities. And we also then have lean capabilities such as, water spider, circulating cards, Kanban, all those types of concepts that are introduced in a lean manufacturing environment are really native inside of supply chain management. And the cool thing,
go
ahead.
Well, and there's a differentiator too, because if you are a manufacturer that uses multiple processes, right, where you do discrete and then you do lean or whatever, right, you've got different processes in your environment. That's a differentiator here with F&O.
Oh yeah, and it's pretty common once you get to where, like, for example, maybe you're designing engines and you have another facility that's actually, producing the motor oil, and you need to join those together to then deliver an engine, a crate engine to somebody, right? I mean, this is the enterprise space, and there's more of that where you've got the mixed mode manufacturing, as we would call it, out there inside of your business environment. So if you have that, immediately this should be very attractive because it handles then those features and capabilities native, where you can do a discrete process but then consume in another legal entity even a process manufactured item as part of that, or even in the same legal entity. And we're going to show that today inside of the USMF legal entity that I'm in inside of here. So really the first area just to kind of highlight, if we look at, for example, our released products, and so I'm just going to click on my released products. I know my screen is a little bit on here in terms of where I am for my head, so I'll try to minimize that. But if I go down, for example, to one of our demo products that we have, I'm going to go to my mid-range speaker, because out of the box, of course, instead of bicycles inside of supply chain management, we produce speakers, and I think that that is a cool sounding thing. So that being said, pun intended, I'm going to go ahead and go into my mid-range speakers and take a quick look at it. So one thing you're going to notice immediately up here is that on the engineer tab, you can see that we have a bill of materials and we also have formulas. So BOMs inside of supply chain management are a discrete manufacturing concept, whereas formulas are more of a process manufacturing or a batch manufacturing concept. So formula. Exactly. Yep. So formulas allow for me to define byproducts and co-products that are inside of here. They allow me to go through and set up how I'm allocating my costs then if I have multiple outputs. An example is if you take chickens and you dispatch chickens, and then you sell those chicken products, chicken breasts, legs, wings, so on and so forth. You're typically taking one whole product and then creating multiple products as part of that output, right? Whereas in BC and even with ProBatch until recently, you didn't have those co-products or joint production,
Correct.
as they call it, right? So
That's
a big differentiator just right out of the
Sorry
box.
for all of our vegan friends.
Yeah, I do apologize. Like, think about broccoli, right? Broccoli florets, broccoli stalks, right? So, well, we can shift very quickly here. So the cool thing about this, though, is that if I go, for example, to my BOM versions, a lot of the same concepts that are there inside of Business Central are here as well. You've got your bill of material list, your consumption quantity that's going to be there. You can set up phantoms that are involved with it. All of those base concepts are there. But once we start going into the route, that's where we go. Rob, I am not repeating that on chat right now. We apologize again to our vegan friends. Let's continue. So what we can do as well then is we can go, for example, to routes inside of here. So routes are where we see a little bit of the deviation start then in terms of what Business Central provides. So Business Central, you go through a route and you specify really all the operations, and you specify either a work center or a machine center are the two different data items that you use with it. Now, inside of finance and operations, what you do is you basically specify what are called resource requirements. And what's cool about this feature, if I actually go ahead and just show really quickly here and generate a new one, is that you can imagine inside of supply chain management that a resource is like a work center or a machine center inside of Business Central. You're relating one-to-one in terms of this particular resource or area that I'm going to be working on to a particular piece of equipment in that routing step, right, as you go through your production process. Now, in ours, though, inside of supply chain management, and I got to be careful with ours because BC is ours too. In my world, right, what you can do with the resource, though, is that you can have resources that are people, for example, or that are tools, or are areas inside of a particular work cell, for example, right? So you can set these up to be able to then reflect those types of requirements. So in this example, when we're producing the speaker, for that routing operation, I have what's called a capability requirement, and this is where we deviate then. We can actually set up a bunch of resources and state that these resources have the capability of doing cabinet production. And then when we actually go through and plan the production order, it'll actually select a resource that has that availability to then go through and then align then where that production process is going to occur. So this is a concept where you don't have to now know. There's lots of scenarios where you can actually produce, for example, a part on multiple machines, and you don't want, you just don't want the optimal path. You want any path to be able to get this done, right? So you can actually then specify, for example, a capability, and you can say, okay, that capability is doing assembly or drying or grading.
I was thinking steel thickness, right?
Exactly.
You could use a larger press. You need a press of a certain size, but anything larger than that would work.
Heavy duty press is needed, right? Or medium duty press or light duty press. Absolutely. And it just makes it so much easier from a maintenance perspective with it, because what you can do then after you actually add those particular requirements, if you click on, for example, my applicable resources here, not only now do I have just a couple of resources, workers or work areas that I can work on with this, I also have a bunch that I can select from, right? That will be used for the scheduling engine to be able to then align those particular resources to the task that needs to be accomplished with it. So really cool in that regard. I'd say that is a differentiating feature then between the versions, and it's just designed for more scale with it, right? That's really the big thing here. So that's one. Other areas that are really, really important with it. So let's go look at a formula-based item. And I absolutely love this because inside of one environment, I can flip back over then and I can go down, for example, let's pick on maybe some foam.
You have Bloody Marys there?
No, I don't have Bloody Marys. That's the one that you were setting up, right? I should have set that up too. Acoustic foam panel. This is a production or a actual batch-based process. So you can see there are formulas involved with it, right? And if I click on my designer, we can see that formula and what the requirements are for it, and then also see co-product production that's inside of here, right? So we've got a nice little tree view here that shows, for example, even though we're producing this acoustic foam panel as part of our production process, we also have a dampening foam and foam remnants that we actually have as co-products that can then be used in other processes, right? Because they're an actual co-product as part of this. And if we take a quick look at it, if I actually close out of this and then we go into our formula version just to drill into this a little bit deeper, what we're going to see is that on my formula version that I have the ability to basically go through and then specify what my co-product production is going to be. And what I can also do inside of here is I can specify not only just co-products, but also byproducts. Typically, co-products are going to be something that you will use in a subsequent process. You'll either take co-production and then do something else with it in another production order, or you'll actually go ahead and then sell it as you go through that particular process, right? The other example, though, is that you've got byproducts where they're basically just scrapped, right? They're either thrown away. You may not even sell them. Like they're something that you want to get rid of. You'll pay people to get rid of byproducts typically. And
can you stock a byproduct?
You can. Yep.
Okay.
So you can
Yeah,
stock
I worked
it.
with a milling company, so they would actually sell the byproduct, which was sawdust.
Yep. And that's where we get into terminology in terms of, you know, inside of our environment, for example, a byproduct, we don't want to consume that. We don't want that to be available inside of a bill of material anywhere else, right? Because it's a byproduct. It's end right there. It is sold off and basically eliminated with it. But there are some customers, to your point, Marcus, they'll take sawdust, for example, and they may sell it, right, to get rid of it. Or they may take it and then put a bunch of resin or glue with it and then create a particle board with it, right? Or some other product as part of that output. Well, that's not a byproduct. That's actually a co-product then, because you can use it in the subsequent process, right? So you've got to make sure that you have, you know, the right setup here to really drive that. And Rob, I do appreciate you just giving us the background on it. That makes a lot of sense. It's like the bomb explode, right? Totally understand with that. So point here then is that this is a native capability then that we have to be able to go through and define that. And what's really cool about this is that we've got a concept then called total cost allocation that we can actually then apply. It's this little field right here that we can actually go through and then define and then apply. And what that means then is that we can actually take the consumption. So anything that we use to produce this product has a cost related to it, right? And when we produce co-products, we want to load some of that cost then on the co-products and along with the actual main product that we're producing as part of that, right? And maybe we want to do it by going down here and going into our area, and maybe we want to define what that cost, it's called cost allocation, right? We want to go and define that 40% of the cost manually goes to this and then the rest goes to that, right? Like we can define what those values are. Whereas with total cost allocation, what we can do is we can actually go through and then have the system, based upon what we produce as the output, scale that cost inside of there, right? So that's a real big differentiating factor from a costing perspective that accountants really like, because it makes it easier for you to manage then what the true costs are going to be for your products that you're producing, so that you can use that then in a subsequent process potentially as well. Other areas that are just kind of native to this, just to kind of understand attributes that are inside of here. So Marcus, I thought you called those when you're looking at features, right? We have a concept called attributes that are inside of our products. These attributes allow for us to basically go through and define then really what those values are, what is the data type and what's the attribute type. And what we can also do is we can actually do what are called customer specific attributes that are inside of here. And the cool thing about that then is if you're actually going through and trying to align, let's say a customer says, let's say you sell sulfuric acid and you've got different potencies of that sulfuric acid, 20, 30, 50, 60, whatever it is. Hopefully you don't have 100%. But with that being said, what you can do is you can actually set up what are called product attributes, and you can even do customer specific product attributes. So that way, when you want to look up inventory to see what you have, because it's all the same product number, it's just different potency differences that are inside of there. But you can actually then look into your inventory beyond just the basic inventory dimensions, which are size, style, color, and then configuration. And now we've got extra ones. Imagine those as just different tiers of product when you're looking at it. The point is that you can very quickly and easily say this customer always requires a 30 to 40% potency for the sale of sulfuric acid to them, and you can set that up as these product attributes, so that way when you're doing your receiving process, you can test it and then validate that. And that's another thing to note here too, Marcus, then, is that like we've got what are called quality associations that are built inside of our solution. So yep,
can I ask you one more question on that product attribute?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I get asked a lot, can you drive pricing based on that attribute as well?
You can. So in our trade agreements, there is the ability inside of the supply chain management to actually set up formula-based calculations for pricing. So it's a pretty cool feature to be able to do that then inside of here. So scale it based upon potency, for example, right? That's a pretty common requirement that comes out there for it.
Or the other side I've seen that is a discount, right? If it didn't necessarily meet a quality standard, you could actually discount the product.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. So, and that's, like I said, that's where we're getting into the enterprise space, where these have a lot of, requirements around that. And some of them that I skimmed inside of here, when you start dealing with pharma, there are things that are called filler ingredients, right? That you may have when you're, for example, creating drugs. And our ingredient types that we have inside of here, as an example, if I actually just generate a new one as an example inside of here, and I'll just take a spud pull. That would be kind of fun on a process manufactured item to do that and see what happens. Yay, it worked. So you can see here, though, that my ingredient types that I have, I can state, for example, what's an active, compensating, or filler-based item. And based upon my compensating principle that I define inside of here, I can then scale those ingredients then based off of other ingredients that are being added then into this batch. So if I needed to have more water to dilute the amount of sulfuric acid that I have, and as you can guess, it's not linear, right? As you add more water, or as you have more sulfuric acid, you need to add more water for that. Well, we can add those compensating principles then to really drive how these ingredients are being made as you go through that. And that even applies like in some chemical processes. You actually use less of a product, right? To even though you scale it out, you would not use the same amount, because it doesn't. The potency has an effect potentially on that, really, as part of that output, right?
Yeah. Can you set a volume relationship to this as well?
You can. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Based upon the unit of measure that you produce with it as well. So pretty cool in
so
that
would
regard.
Yeah, that would be limiting. So yeah, your package size is X. You'd add filler up to that point of X, but again, adjusting the components based on, let's say, a potency calculation, you'd also you'd run into a limit where you can only add so much product, for example, right?
Exactly. Right.
That's exactly it.
Yep. So, just kind of standard then inside of here to be able to do some of those base capabilities then from a formula perspective that's inside of here. And I know we only have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to highlight those are some big differences, obviously, because in the sales order processing, being able to look into those attributes to filter down that inventory requirement is pretty critical. But there's more too. So, inside of finance and operations, and I'm going to pull up my other environment because this is the newer version of it. There's another feature then that we have that is not really native inside of Business Central, but we look at, like, for example, what's called production floor execution. So this is that shop floor concept where inside of BC we can do it. It's a third party, it's an add-on, it's an extension that you buy for it, but inside of the finance and operations apps, it's native. And this is the new one that came out actually within one of the last releases where you can
Yeah,
take
it's really
this,
nice and clean.
isn't it? Yeah, you can make it
Yeah.
full screen. You can get rid of the nav bar on the far left, so it's just basically this by having a URL string inside of here. But when you sign into here, for example, I've got my listing of jobs that I can interact with. I can actually go ahead and then select those jobs that I want to interact with. So maybe I'm doing installation of wiring. I can see the details of it, what I'm supposed to be doing, what is the employees that are active on it. I can record break information. I can start jobs and then specify what that quantity is going to be that I'm going to be producing with it, right? This is a really nice touch-based interface. And if I just, my laptop has the ability to do touch, I can just go ahead and then click on it, for example, to start what quantity I'm going to be going through the production process of. And I have a really nice environment then to interact with to be able to then record that detail as I go through my production process. So when we start talking about shop floor capabilities, that's really a native capability then that we have inside of the supply chain management to be able to then do more shop floor control, instructions that pop up, work instructions. We've had clients that have wanted to, for example, have CAD drawings that they could actually attach to it, have it pop up, and then pivot it with an AutoCAD viewer, for example. All native capabilities then inside of Dynamics 365 supply chain to be able to drive that. So a really, really cool concept to be able to then use some more of the advanced features that are inside of here. And then lastly, the lean manufacturing capability. I mean, if you take a look, I mean, from an actual manufacturing perspective inside of here, we've got examples of material handling equipment interfaces. Used to be called MHACs, if I remember correctly, for automation with those different machines that can do automated picking for you. Well, we have a whole interface inside of here then. And from a production perspective, if you're dealing with a lot of small parts, that's really important to have, right, to be able to do that. And then, yes, Rob, to your point, I was getting to it, which is awesome, mixed reality. So you've got guides as well. So during the production process, it's becoming more common now as well to have a guide that you can actually have where you put on the HoloLens, and I haven't set this up yet, but I'm going to get it set up, but you can actually have a marker on the actual piece that you're working on, and it will show you where to place the components then on that particular product as you're actually going through and doing your production process. So there's just, like I said, a lot more inside of here that we don't have the time to go through. I wanted to highlight some of the differences. You can see we've got Kanban, scheduling boards, job scheduling. For the lean manufacturing, we've got lean production flows, different models that we can actually set up for it as well. Like it just goes so deep in terms of what those capabilities are. But the nice thing about it is it's all in one solution without any type of customizations that are required to be able to support it, which is a pretty cool thing. So I think, Marcus, that's it. I don't know, anyone on chat, if you had any questions before we kind of wrap up here. I'll kind of wait for you guys to put some questions in the chat if you have them, and hopefully we can respond to them. One thing I did want to mention is that we have a couple of other sessions that we will be tackling as part of our confab. So today was the manufacturing capabilities. Really, what we're going to try next year, I think, Marcus, on the 26th, we're going to try to decipher licensing, right?
Yeah,
right?
I was looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that's always a fun conversation. An hour on licensing. So if you have not talked to anybody about licensing and you want to understand kind of the things that we see all the time, you should definitely be part of that conversation. If anything, jump in to ask your questions on it, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them. Yep, go ahead, Marcus.
Answers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, bring your answers too. Like, say, like examples are storage. Like, you would not believe how many customers and prospects I've had conversations around storage costs and what the tactics are around that to help you reduce your cost on that, right? Like, that's what we're trying to do here, is help you understand what that impact is. So that'll be the next confab, and I think that's actually a long overdue one. Licensing is not fun. We'll just be really candid with it. We'll try to make that session really fun as well. And then the other one right now, It ironically kind of aligns, Marcus, with Microsoft's stated, next year focus, data strategy and reporting, right? Like talking about what do we use on the Microsoft stack to do reporting, right? There's
Yep.
so many tools that are out there, but what should we be using, such as Azure Synapse, data lakes? Like how do all those play well together? That will be on, it looks like 9/9 at this point to go through that particular conversation as well. So that should be a lot of fun.
Yep.
Beyond that, Marcus, I think we're at a wrap then, right? So we're at
Yep. I think
12:03.
we are.
Any parting words of wisdom?
No, no. Have a great
No.
afternoon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everyone, thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining our stream. We'll be back on the 26th to go through the licensing. Make sure to stay safe and enjoy the weather because guess what, guys? Fall is coming. Fall is coming. All right.
Yep.
Talk to you guys
Have a
later.
good afternoon.